how content marketing became the one thing that you focused on early on by providing value for free to the marketplace, allowing you to connect with your ideal audience. But did you have the idea to monetize this somehow in the beginning? Because I know a lot of the listeners to this interview are probably wondering how they monetize all of this, how they start to actually...
Well, I say this all the time in my talks, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's universally applicable. And that is, in the immigration space, historically there have been two types of people: those that want to pay and those that don't want to pay. So, if you understand that those that don't want to pay can serve as the catalyst to spreading the ideas that you're all about, and you produce content that helps them answer questions, solve problems, ultimately helps them achieve their goals and their objectives, and you know what those goals and objectives are because you've got such a commanding sense of your niche, then you can take care of those people, and those people, without realizing it, will be taking care of you as well. Out of that batch will emerge those individuals that fall into the camp of the people that do want to pay. By the time you've naturally sort of allowed these two types of prospects, if you will, people that you want to have relationships with, have emerged and have settled in the way that they do, those that do want to pay have become completely familiar with you. They have learned to trust you. They've been educated as to what the solutions to their problems are, and they've been given everything that they need to make informed decisions about how they can go about solving their problem. And then, particularly if you're in the service business, those people who do want to pay, they're buying something that isn't immediately apparent. And in our case, in the immigration business, what we're selling is peace of mind. So once I realised how I could use all the ideas of my intellectual heroes and a lot of others, because those are the four key instigators of my intellectual shift. But I've read a lot around the edges as well and learned a lot too. That's been sort of incorporated by osmosis over time. But once I realised that these thinkings represented a strategic advantage to differentiate myself not only on the content that I produce but also on the service delivery model. That meant that because I got such a huge array of content and I delivered that content in such a way so that people could know what they needed to do to get where they needed to go, they could then determine the true value that I offered to them, and that is what was up for sale was something that they could buy. It was something that they could acquire in a risk-free state, and essentially they knew damn well that because of everything that had been sort of put before them, both from a content perspective and also from a business model design perspective, meant that everything was stacked in their favour. And if it's all stacked in their favour, people will transact. So my mission over time has been to identify what are those wrinkles that stop people saying yes, where it's quite reasonable for me to assume the responsibility or the liability or the risk in delivering that thing to them, which is basically just honesty at the end of the day. And I'm able to know what those things really are and what I have that I can offer that will resonate with them because I know my market so well. So what's really good about this whole idea of intelligent content marketing and this universality is that if you take those principles, you can apply them to any niche that is serviced well through the provision of content, ideally high quality content. That then gives you the opportunity to build products and services on the back of that end where your competition, because they don't have the content resources that you developed, they can't then offer these interesting and unusual and disruptive offerings, these products and services that you can offer because you've developed a whole content pool to avail the creation of those products and services. So in my space, right, without exception, in Hong Kong, and I would say the vast majority elsewhere in the world, professional immigration service providers are providing an immigration service that is a minimum of 30 years out of date. But you need to know your niche, right? You need to have the confidence to know that the kind of things that my intellectual heroes are saying, you can apply them to your own thinking and the configuration of what it is that you're going to offer. And if you make a commitment to documenting your knowledge and know-how in whichever format that makes sense, A, for you, and B, to be received by the party that's going to be receiving it. But if you document that knowledge and know-how, if you produce tools, kits, resources, things that answer questions and solve problems, whatever your niche is, put down that content layer and then configure your service proposition around the realities that you've got that content available to you and your competition don't have it. Reverse the risk and you're on your way. And the connection economy enables all of that. And I'm fortunate because I started my first business really deep in the heart of the industrial economy, pre-internet. So I came into the provision of professional services on the back of, my colleagues that have been doing it for 30, 40 years prior, and laying down everyone's expectations of what that sort of service experience is going to be like. So if you've done the kind of things that we've done, then you immediately are completely different from everybody else. And if it's a proposition that is so compellingly good, and there's no reason why you can't develop a proposition that's incredibly good, but if it is really good, then the market will start to organise itself around what you've put together, not what has been historically available. So you differentiate yourself in that fashion, and over time you change the market landscape, and you then begin to outcompete your competition, who ultimately haven't either woken up to how this stuff works. So you will redefine the market under the feet of your competition. They don't know that you've done it until it's too late. And that's the beauty of this entire strategy, because if you're putting your content layer down and you make a commitment to publishing over time and get those resources down, then ultimately what happens is your competition, A, don't have the sort of the business orientation to be able to adopt that approach, and B, if you've had a clear run at it without any competition, your competitors have to catch up, and they've got a lot of catching up to do. And it's been my experience that it's all too hard for the competition by then, or if the competition have caught on to you, then what they will do is probably niche down into another segment of your market, and that you haven't developed a strong proposition around, and they'll go for that instead. So you might ultimately end up ceding some of that ground to people. But, certainly in professional services, the niches are so wide, they're so broad, there's so many opportunities to service a market that isn't limited by geography. And if you answer questions and solve problems, put your content down, design products and services that your competitors can't copy, then if your competition leave you alone, you're going to win by default.